Here's from your book. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all of fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully.
Yeah, I did put that rather mildly, didn't I?
Get off the fence, Richard. Tell me what you really think. Does that not sound just a wee bit unfair?
It's funny. My wife, Lala Ward, and I do public readings from the book. And you know, when you do a public performance, it's always a good idea to get the audience on side by getting a laugh early on. That's why comedians have warm-up acts. Mm-hmm. We always use that early on because the audience laughs. It's funny. And I think I know why it's funny. It's because it is saying something quite strong, something actually pretty undeniable if you read the Old Testament. But it is strong. But there's a contrast between what's the strength of what is being said and the use of these long Latinate words, sort of slightly scholarly sounding words, filicidal, megalomaniacal. And I think that's what makes it, that's what gives it the humor. It's very strong, but is it disrespectful as well? Well, it's disrespectful of a non-existent entity, which is God, certainly. But I think it's entirely justified if you open most of any of the first 5 books of the Old Testament. Obviously we know where you're coming from, but one wonders whether or not you can make your point without being so disrespectfully in the face of those who happen to believe and for whom religion is an essential part of their life. Let them argue against it. Let them say, no, God is not a capriciously malevolent bully. God is not jealous. God is not murdering. And let them look at their own Bible and find and contradict it. They won't be able to. Well, let me give you another one here. This in reference to the assassination attempt on John Paul II. You noted that he thanked Our Lady of Fatima. And then you went on to say, presumably Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Guadalupe, Our Lady of, I can't even say this word, Medjugorje, is that how you pronounce it? So. Our Lady of Akita, Our Lady of Zaitun, Our Lady of Garabandal, Our Lady of Knock were busy on other errands at the time. I mean, that's very snippy. Do you have to be... It's funny. I know it's meant to be funny, but it's also... It is funny. It gets a huge laugh when it's read out. But it's really, like, in-your-face disrespectful, too. It is. Why shouldn't you be... You've fallen right into the trap of saying that religion is entitled to some special respect. You would never... I mean, if somebody said something like that about Bush or about any politician you like, you would not say, that's disrespectful. You'd say that's the ordinary rough and tumble of political discourse. There's 2 reasons not... I'm not making the argument, I am reporting the argument. Okay. Others would argue there are 2 reasons not to do it the way you've done it. Number 1, and particularly with the analogy you've just given, George Bush, despite the feelings of some in the red states, is not God. So that's one analogy that doesn't work. Number 2, there are people in this world today, and I can think of cartoonists in, people who've done cartoons about Muhammad in Denmark, who get killed for doing this kind of stuff. Are you not worried about being killed? George Bush is not God, you said. I mean, you've fallen right back into it again. I mean, you have assumed that God... I mean, God doesn't even exist, for goodness sake. George Bush at least exists. You've fallen right back into the trap of saying that God is entitled to special respect. Well, you've done something in this conversation you didn't do in your book, which you've just said God does not exist. Okay, well... That's not what you say in the book. Okay, I mean, in the book you say he may exist. You know what I mean. God is in the same status as fairies, so okay. You wouldn't worry if I was disrespectful to fairies, would you? No. You have included in your book the new 10 Commandments for atheists, and I want to read out the 3rd commandment, which is, treat your fellow human beings, your fellow living things, and the world in general with love, honesty, faithfulness, and respect. Do you think you have shown those qualities to those who oppose your side of the argument? Yeah. Well, first of all, these were not my new 10 commandments. I Googled 10 commandments or new 10 commandments or something, and I just took the first list that I came. The point I was trying to make was that you don't need a Bible to get 10 commandments. It was really illustrating the point I was making earlier about this steadily shifting zeitgeist. And so there is, and this was an atheist making up his own 10 commandments, which I sort of thought sounded nice. But I didn't compose them myself. And you have raised the point that he did use the word respect, and you've quite rightly
contrasted that with my saying that religion is treated with too much respect. So probably if I'd written the new Ten Commandments, I would not have written that particular one.
Might have left the last part
Yeah.
out. Last thing, you know that if there is a God, you are in, I mean, you're glued, screwed, and tattooed. You know that, right?
Well, depends what kind of a God it is. I mean, one of the points, I mean, you're talking about Pascal's wager.
Yes.
I made the point in the book that what if all the Christians get to heaven and discover that it's not Yahweh there at all, but Baal? I mean, aren't they? What was the phrase you used? Glued, screwed, and tattooed?
That's
yes.
the one. Yes.
I mean, maybe I'd be better off than them if it turns out to be Baal, or what if it's Wotan or Zeus?
But I gather your position is that if there is a God, and when I die, if I get to heaven, he will at least, or she will at least, give me credit for having had the strength of my convictions over the years.
I think it's more than that. I think that the whole basis of Pascal's wager is to assume that the one thing God really, really wants is to be believed in. I mean, that's a pretty insecure sort of God, isn't it? If what he really wants is for you to believe in him, I mean, why not that you should love him or love your fellow people, or be honest, or be true to your own principles, as you say. There are all sorts of virtues that God, if he exists, might value. I find it hard to imagine that a God would necessarily value belief above everything else. I mean, if I were God and somebody didn't believe in me, I'd say, well, he didn't believe in me, but on the other hand, he was very good to his family and very honest, and he worked hard and all sorts of things like that.
I'm sure, I know, and I'm sure you do as well, know lots of people who, when they have a brush with very significant illness, they may not have been religious people throughout the course of their lives, but at that moment where it looks like this is it, they find religion. Do you... Now, I'm not wishing it upon you, obviously, but there will come a day when you will be close to the end of your life. Have you thought about that moment, and B, have you thought, you know, in that moment where it's just about all over, I can conceive, actually, of wanting to start a conversation with whatever you want to call it.
Yes. There are no atheists in foxholes, are there? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, I tell you one thing. I'm going to do my damnedest to make sure there are reliable witnesses at my deathbed, and preferably a tape recorder switched on, so that nobody can write down afterwards, as happened to poor Darwin, that there's a deathbed conversion. It's a regular thing for people who've spent their lives as atheists. After they're dead and can no longer defend themselves, religious people will start myths, urban legends, that they had a deathbed conversion. Obviously, I can't know what's going to happen to me. I may very well go gaga and senile, in which case goodness knows what I might believe. But I have certainly no intentions that way at the moment.
At the risk of using a line from the Bible, you don't expect to be Saul on the road to Damascus.
I don't know.
Okay. Richard Dawkins, great to meet you. Thanks so much for doing this.
Thank you very much.